So, as a marriage and family therapist, I guess one of my natural interests is in family life. And then by extension from that, I've really, I think, kind of tapped into parenting. It's another area that I really find enjoyable, that I think that I've got some abilities and skills that I'm able to share with people. When I put that together with kind of a philosophical approach that I have, which is positive psychology, that is looking at the strengths, trying to maintain and build up the strengths that individuals and families have. I think it's a good overlap for us to talk a little bit today about developmental assets that come from the Search Institute. And so I'll put a link down below for you to be able to access it easily. I think there is such value in the developmental assets, and I really want to explore it a lot more. Unfortunately, because I want to be respectful of their copyright, there's only so much that I can do, for instance, in taking a look at doing a course on it through Vivens Academy. But in this way, I can expand on it a little bit for you and give you some ideas that I think could be very valuable for you, very helpful for you. So the developmental assets are a list of 40 different qualities or presences or factors that can exist in a young person's life that are helpful, healthy building blocks. So there was, a few years ago, I think, there was a little bit of a focus on what we called the ACEs, the ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experiences. And there's value in that, in taking a look at negative situations that have happened in the life of a young person and therefore are going to impact that person's function in all kinds of different ways. But as I said, I really am drawn to the positives and what we can look at that will really kind of build people up and help them to be more functional, more successful, and happier in a full kind of a way. So the developmental assets are divided into external and internal assets, and then even within those, they are also further grouped. So I want to list those to you, maybe talk a little bit about them, I guess mostly just to whet your appetite so that you will follow up and you'll take a look at this. And I'll explain to you why I find this even more interesting than I've already talked about. So under the external assets, they have a category called support, and in there they have family support, positive family communication, other adult relationships, caring neighborhood, caring school climate, and parent involvement in schooling. And although there is some overlap in those, they're fairly distinct areas. There is empowerment as a second area. Community values youth, youth as resources, service to others, and safety. I just speak a little bit here in terms of what community values youth means, and that is the idea that within the community there's kind of a positive view of youth and how they are members of the community and how they can contribute, which is also kinds of then extends into youth as resources. So the idea that there are practical ways that young people can be involved in their own community. A third area under the external assets is boundaries and expectations. So family boundaries, school boundaries, neighborhood boundaries, adult role models, positive peer influence, and high expectations. Again, some overlap in there, but also fairly distinct areas. At some point in the future, I'm going to do some talking about parental authority and how we can talk about different parental approaches, parenting styles. And one of the things that we'll talk about at that time is the idea that having expectations and standards for our children is extremely healthy. Appropriately implemented, appropriately explained, and so on. That's an extremely healthy way to help children to grow and to reach and try to achieve their potential. The last of the four external asset areas is constructive use of time, and under that we have creative activities, youth programs, religious community, and time at home. So here I want to talk a little bit about why I also think beyond what I've already talked about, about the reasons why I'm so happy with, and I think that we should give more attention to developmental assets. One of the things that I really like is the ability here for us to make ideas more concrete, so that we're not merely talking about we want good things for our adolescents, for our young people, but we're saying what are some specific ways that we can build that up. And so it's almost like we got a bit of a checklist here, a way for us to look at where is it that I, as a parent or another adult in a child's life, have the ability to make things better? How can I encourage growth? I should have mentioned this before, I forgot to. I'm looking at and I'm using it as the example, the developmental assets list for adolescents from ages 12 to 18. It looks a little different for different age ranges, and they go down as young as age 3. And I think the youngest age range is from 3 to 5. So depending on where your children are or the children with whom you work, tend to be, there's different lists that you can take a look at that are more appropriate to that age range. So those are the external assets, and those are things that tend to be more in our control, that we are able to do something with. The internal assets are more difficult. These oftentimes have to do with the attitudes and tendencies that are within our own children. Okay, and so although I believe that there are positives that we can do in there, they are a little bit more kind of constrained. So again, there's 4 groups. The first group is commitment to learning, and it includes achievement motivation, school engagement, homework, bonding to school, and reading for pleasure. The second group is positive values, which include caring, equality and social justice, integrity, honesty, responsibility, and restraint. This fits in so well with a virtue approach, a character development approach, that is also a big part of how I like to approach my work. The third area of internal assets is social competencies, planning and decision making, interpersonal competence, cultural competence, resistance skills, and peaceful conflict resolution. And the last of the 4 areas under internal assets are positive identity, which includes personal power, self-esteem, sense of purpose, and positive view of personal future. So there, even on one sheet, which is really what I'm looking at, just a simple one-sheet explanation, there is so much depth and value in here that I think would be so worthwhile for the time of really any adults who work with, who care about young people. And they have little sentence or a sentence fragment explaining each of the areas. So I don't want to have to go through that and take your time reading, which you're very capable of looking at yourself. And it also encourages you to go and look at this and hopefully also print it out, maybe post it someplace and make it kind of a go-to reference for you. But I want to add one last thing as I'm talking about these developmental assets. The Search Institute also says that the fundamental approach that they have is relationships, what they call developmental relationships. How adults especially work with, connect with young people. And they say there are 5 what they call essential elements: expressing care, providing support, challenging growth, sharing power, and expanding possibilities. And although I wish, I'm so impressed by the work of the Search Institute that I wish it had come from me, that I had been part of its development. The fact that I think of it so highly makes it very easy for me to say, you know what, it's not me, but this is so worth your time that I really encourage you to take a look at it. And as I said, there's going to be a link down below. Have a great day.